Okay, welcome everybody to our virtual roundtable on human flourishing. I'm very excited to see the sign of WAB behind Marta. We were just talking about how Western Academy of Beijing was a big part of JUMP's flourishing and starting as an organization, and Angela and I connected there, and so there's lots of great connections around the world. I'll let the wonderful speakers introduce themselves in a second. Thank you to everyone who's joining virtually, and thanks to everyone who watches this after the fact. As we go along, the chat is open, and please send questions that you have to our tech team, which will be feeding them to us, and then we'll kind of discuss the topics that we can. We had a lot of questions come in prior to it, so we may not get to all of them, but we're going to do our best to cover the main subtopics that people wanted to hear us talk about around human flourishing. So to start us off, I'll ask Fatma to do the honors and introduce herself, where she's from in terms of what school or organization, where she's at in the world. And then there's two questions. One is, when did you flourish as a young person? Where did you grow up and when did you flourish? And then the second question is, what do you want to be when you grow up? So kick us off, Fatma.
Thank you, Justin. So my name is Fatma Odeimat. I was born in Ghana, raised in Ghana. I work at Al Rayyan International School. I'm the school director there. When did I flourish? I flourished actually a bit later. So I didn't have I attended the French international education system, and it was kind of very limited in the experiences that we had. So it was at university when I went to medicine, and my whole choice of choosing medicine was because I felt I needed to go back to Ghana and make a change about certain things. And I ended up in medicine. And that's where I got involved in many international organizations, doing a lot of volunteer work, traveling the world. And I discovered a whole part of myself, the skills that I developed, the things I was very passionate about. And that's why I decided, though I graduated, to not pursue clinical medicine, but actually do community and public health work. And this is how I ended up working with children affected by armed conflict, child labor, developing educational systems, programs, working on policies and with governments on how to allow access and equity in education. And I was completely hooked. Interestingly enough, I ended up going back home, and in the school that I am now it's been 14 years that I've been in that school. And my whole purpose was to eventually develop an educational system that allowed students to discover very early on their passion in life, to experience the stuff I experienced later on in life. And but I'm joining from Paris right now. I'm actually here on a conference. And what do I want to do when I grow up is exactly what I'm doing right now. I think I found my joie de vivre purpose of life, and I'm very happy where I am.
Over to you, Marta.
So hello, everyone. I'm Marta Medved-Krajnovic, and I'm currently the head of Western Academy of Beijing. So I have the honor to be at WAB right now. So I come from Croatia. I was born on the Croatian coast in a very small town, and when I felt I was flourishing most is when we would have a lot of tourists coming to my small hometown during the summertime. Italians, Germans, British, and so on. And I also loved traveling. So I was really, always happy when I could travel. So I think it's not a surprise that I ended up being in this international school world. I also, similar to Fatma, I actually, until kind of 6 months before I had to really decide what I'm going to study, I was 100% sure for almost 10 years that I would be a medical doctor. My father was a doctor. My brother was a doctor. But then something changed. My mom was a teacher, and somehow I thought, well, as a medical doctor, yes, I can help people, but at the same time, it will take a long time until I get to that stage of, being able to help someone and so on. Plus, at that point in time, doing medical studies in Croatia would pretty much tie me to Croatia. So I decided actually to switch my idea, and then I decided to become a teacher. And the same as my mom, and I really, really loved it. And I think also, I had a lot of fun studying. I would say that I'm really flourishing now. I love being at WAB. I think it's a wonderful school where we are really focused on human flourishing and so on. So it's a wonderful place to be. However, I still have some plans before I grow up and when I grow up. Before I grow up, I would still like to do maybe some kind of global education role, or at least, something that would really help and support education of children of all kinds globally, or do something for my home country, Croatia. And then when I really grow up, I would like to go back to Croatia, where it's, my heaven on earth on an island, and I have a garden there, and there is the sea and so on. So I was thinking, what about some kind of, farm to table concept? Maybe I can open a small restaurant and, produce stuff, from earth to the table for people's pleasure.
Great. Thanks, Marta. Over to you, Angela.
Great. Well, good evening from Singapore. My name is Angela Meikle, and I'm a global head of IB World Schools based in the global center that's here. Let's see, if I think about flourishing in my youth, I grew up in California, on the coast of California, but every summer, we would travel up to the mountains, the Sierra Nevada mountains, and we had a small family cabin that was off the grid with no electricity, no telephone. It was before the internet, so there was no internet. And we would just spend our days and weeks in the summer, hiking, swimming, looking for arrowheads, making mud balls. And I think my flourishing was outside and in a really pristine and beautiful environment, and learning how to sort of navigate that space. And it was a very intergenerational space that really made it special. And I think when I grow up, as we all think about what will we be, I feel really blessed in the work that I do now, which is working with a phenomenal team, and we support several thousand schools that are IB schools, and really supporting a program that I just so deeply believe in, which is an IB education. So I feel like I'm living my dream, but I think if I, like Marta said, really, really grow up, you probably will find me back in California, and I'll open a wellness retreat and invite you all in, and we can go and spend time there together.
Great. Thanks, everyone, for the introductions. For those of you who are listening, a tech reminder is if you go to view in gallery, it won't switch when people are speaking. And so it provides a better viewing of the roundtable because you can see all of us at the same time. So I'll just provide the quick frame of this conversation. We talked about human flourishing for a while, and we wanted to have a virtual roundtable. And so a month ago, we're like, hey, let's do a virtual roundtable on flourishing, get some great minds together on it. And then luckily the OECD, about a week and a half ago, 2 weeks ago, launches this report, which is perfectly timed. So we've shared that with all of the speakers and also with the people who are listening. And really, if you haven't had a chance, it's definitely worth clicking into. They did a bunch of research and they created this really beautiful framework to help provide an understanding. And out of the report, I'll just read, flourishing is understood as the integration of meaning, well-being, agency, ethical responsibility, enabling individuals to live with purpose, contribute to flourishing societies, and act in harmony with the world they inhabit, co-inhabit. So that's what they define it as. But it's this big, concept. It's kind of an enigma. And so when we were prepping for this roundtable, the speakers and I, we kind of said, hey, well, let's actually ground in what our personal definition is. And so we'll start off with the question of, to each of the speakers, what does human flourishing mean to you? And what does it look like in your context? And really trying to give, the listeners a sense of what that word means to you and what it looks like. So we'll start with Marta, and then we'll go to Angela and Fatma.
Yeah, I actually think that this is really a beautiful word, from, its etymology, where it came from, and, what kind of feelings it kind of creates, at least in me, when I think about flourishing, I just feel about, being grounded, being connected, and growing with the earth and with the people around me. And while I'm really enthusiastic about the word itself and the concept, not really the word, the concept, I also think that when we are introducing it into the educational concept, where every few years we have a new word or a new concept, we have to be very, very careful how we are presenting it to the people. And at least in my context at WAB, we are using it as just, the umbrella concept for everything we've been doing so far. We are a school that has a mission that sounds, connect, inspire, challenge, make a difference. So there is this kind of feeling of connection, inspiring each other, making a difference in the world, because flourishing means, also getting a reward of doing, personal reward for doing some really good things for the people around us and for the planet. We are a school that is focused on well-being, on student and staff, agency. Again, all of that are the essential components of flourishing, and I think it is very important. There are a lot of schools in the world that in the past 10 years have started really focusing on social emotional learning, well-being, agency, making a difference, global citizenship, and flourishing is just one beautiful word that connects it all.
Mm-hmm.
Angela, what would you add?
Yeah, I would very much sort of agree and connect with what Marta's saying about being a sort of a conceptual container, that it really holds a lot of competencies, sort of values and skills within it. And to me, it really connects to humanity. And I think at sort of this time that we are in the planet, and with sort of the different crises, global crises that we're navigating our way through, to me, it's also a really timely concept to be unpacking with our communities. And I think connecting to what we already do, and so sort of thinking about what we're doing and where do we want to go. So I think it has a really ecological sort of underpinning to it, in that it really reminds us of the interdependence of our relationships, and who we are and how we connect with others. So I think to me, it has a strong purpose in education today.
Great. And Fatma?
Yeah, for me, it very much relates to what I just said about I am exactly where where I need to be, where I want to be, is because I love, and it's a concept I introduced to our community a couple of years ago, and ikigai, the concept, Japanese concept of doing what you love to do, what you're good at, what the world needs, because you feel that whatever you do has an impact around you, and that people kind of appreciate it and are impacted by your work, and that you also get to live from it and you're paid for doing that. So when you kind of find all of these intersections, this is where you connect to your purpose of being. And I guess for me, what the most powerful work we do as educators is when we're able to connect with students and help them identify who they are, what they are, what's their purpose in life, their raison d'être, their life. And I think OECD even said that the biggest contributor to student success is teacher-student relationship, nothing else. And even it's the biggest contributor to reducing student anxieties, interestingly enough. Not only that, I was going through the report, and it says that success in education today is about building curiosity, opening minds. It's about compassion, opening hearts. And it's about courage, mobilizing our cognitive, social, and emotional resources to take action. So heart, mind, action. And this is something our school, we've a whole educational model and a dual learning model on heart, mind, and action. And I guess this is the biggest powerful thing that a school can do, when you're able to touch the hearts of your students, inspire their minds, like open them up, and then make them realize that even as students, as early as possible, they don't need to wait to university and after, they can take action and make a difference and impact the world around them.
So a really great grounding of how human flourishing is forming in the three different communities and organizations that you're operating in. I think, Angela, you talked about this a little bit, of the complexity that the world's becoming with AI and with globalization and everything that's happening. There seems to be this lean into systems-based education, be it ecological or be it social systems, compass education, all these great tools that are trying to see how complex things are and that ability to operate in the complexity. So the first subtopic is really around, okay, if human flourishing is something that OECD says you got to be focused on this, what does it mean to you, and how do you bring it into the strategy of the work that you're doing? And so it's basically, what is human flourishing? How does it fit inside your strategy? And so I'll start with a great thinker, one of my favorite, Howard Gardner. a quote, and then we'll go and Angela will kick us off. But the quote that Howard Gardner had is, education is inherently an act of shaping human beings. What we choose to emphasize defines who we become or who we create, and what we become is education. And so with that quote in mind, Angela, where is human flourishing sitting in the strategy of the IB, and what drove the decision of the IB to kind of bring human flourishing into focus?
Beautiful. Yeah, thanks for that, Justin. So I think something that I feel really excited and also sort of empowered about is that right now the IB has made a very clear commitment, and our strategy, sort of our guiding star is that by 2032, we want to enrich the education of 5 million young people per year from much more globally representative communities in ways that enable human and planetary flourishing. So that is our strategic goal. That is our strategic mission. And then underneath that, we have three key pillars. And the very first pillar is designing education for flourishing. So how do we think about sort of making sure that we can adapt and update the design and the delivery of what we believe are really high quality educational programs to demonstrably help young people flourish. And so for us, that means at looking sort of unpacking, like we spoke about earlier, what are the competencies that you might need as a learner to be able to then sort of meet the aspiration. So we've looked at really 5 key areas, and those are well-being. We've done a lot of research into how do we engage with complex systems, like you were saying, Justin. Empathizing with others is a key domain. Maintaining critical judgment is another area. And then the fifth area is continuously self-developing. So those are the 5 key abilities that we've crafted. And this may change. This is our current thinking that is being informed by lots of sources. And I would say maybe the other piece to note is that when our current Director General, Olli-Pekka Heinonen, joined in 2021, he had been very involved with the OECD because he was the Minister of Education in Finland. And so he had been involved in a project previously to joining that was looking at high performing systems. And this was a project that involved Finland, Estonia, Singapore, Australia, the UK, and Canada. And it had 2 other partners, and that was the IB and also the National Center for Education and Economics, NCE, in the States. So the IB was brought into this multi-year project that really looked at defining what is it about high performing systems that helps them to function and meet their aims. And one of the key findings of that was that they have sort of an intention towards flourishing. And that was something that came out of this project. And there is a connection to the report that just was released in the work that was done. So I think we've been very informed for a couple of years of sort of that thinking through working with other ministers of education, but other agencies as well in shaping our thinking and I think reaffirming the commitment to flourishing and designing for that intentionally.
Great. And Fatma, how does human flourishing and this concept fit into your strategy as a school? And there's a broad umbrella of IB and OECD that are saying, here's the framework, here's the domains, and then how do we execute that at a school level in Accra with kids on the ground? What does that look like?
Honestly, it's very interesting because I was here presenting in the conference, the ACE Summit, on it's the education in the age of AI. So, and everything we're talking here is about the competencies and human flourishing. And we're not talking about STEM or technology or coding or computing. That wasn't even for a whole day, our whole conversation, the whole presentation. OECD was here, IB, Pilar was here. And all our conversation were going around the human skills, the life skills of, and this is the urgency that we've been trying to push forward, that more than ever, this focus on life skill competencies, values. We've been talking about trust, about courage, about ethics in the age of AI. And more than ever now, the focus, nobody's talking about literacy and math in here. And everybody's talking about what kind of individual, what kind of skills and competencies our students and the future humans, facing this kind of fast changing world, this kind of technological world and AI driven. So what kind of skills and what kind of who they need to be able to manage that. And honestly, this is for us as a focus as a school, looking at that. And it's interesting to see that our whole focus in the coming years is going to be on courage, on leadership. So these are the main things: courage, leadership, ethics, communication skills, social skills, and kind of developing this in our students. And we've gone to the level of even assessing for that. So we have an external assessment tool, like the ones we have for MAP and stuff. No, we assess these competencies. And it was wonderful to have these conversations. So the kids were so excited about finally having an assessment that is actually looking at all of that in them and having these conversations between them and with their parents and with us. And also linking it then to all the initiatives that we're doing. That with JUMP, we're working on our leadership model, and that for a whole week, our students went, interacted with JUMP, and the conversations we had after that about they were talking so much about growth, and I told them, like, you're IB students. We do a lot of that reflection, we do a lot of that learning in the classroom. They said it's very different. What we love about these kind of competencies assessment, what we love about these experiences that we get around leadership and these initiatives and community service and engagement, and is that there's assessment for growth. We're focused on our growth as individual. And I remember, like, that's what I did when I started volunteering and working. It was so much about me growing from my experiences and learning from them. And it was okay to fail and make mistakes. And I'm like, and we're thinking as a school, then how do we create that in our environment? How do we create the space within this timetable that is crazy, with all of, what we need to achieve for the IB and all these external examinations and these university requirements? How do we create an environment that is able to also focus so much on that, for the students to have that feeling that they could experience things and develop and grow without having to to worry about their grades and the impact on the future. So I don't know. For us, we're still in the questioning phase, and I guess that's the best thing you can do as an organization, is ask questions and create space for these conversations. But it's okay. That's the first thing I tell my parents and my community. I don't have the answers right now. I honestly don't have, but maybe together, as we're doing all of this, and we're bringing all these experts and talking and going out and asking these questions together, we can find answers. And this is where we're at right now. I don't have a clear answer, but we're inquiring, we're questioning, we're experiencing, and most importantly, we're taking risks. We're trying things that we feel are important for our students. We don't know if we will succeed or fail, but at least we're trying. And I think we're living these competencies. We're courageous and we're risk takers.
Great. Thanks for sharing that, Fatma. And Marta, when you look at human flourishing within the strategy, I think WAB's a pretty unique school in the larger market of China, and kind of how does human flourishing and that innovation hub that WAB's always been, how does that sit within your strategy as a school, as a community, as a hub for human flourishing in the region? What is that in your board conversations or in your school conversations? How does it all piece into what you're trying to do?
I think you mentioned kind of like the WAB has always been, and I think that's actually really, really true. So, when I look at how, flourishing fits WAB, and if I go back to the founding statements of WAB, Fatma just was talking about togetherness. So the founding statements of WAB say, WAB educates the whole child. So this idea of not only academic learning, but also whole child, social-emotional learning, connectedness to people around, that has been there from the very beginning of the school. Then the WAB champions its staff agency, which is also a big part of flourishing, was there from the start. Connection between it was homeschool relationship was one of the founding principles. So these three principles: holistic education, championing staff, and homeschool relationship have defined WAB from the very start. Then came WAB values a few years later, which again talk about focus on the learner, on caring, diversity, gong he, which means working hard, working together. Again, flourishing. If you start dissecting flourishing, you can also connect it to all of these core values. Then we developed our mission that I mentioned earlier, and it says, connect, inspire, challenge, make a difference. Again, you can equal it to ideas embodied in flourishing. And then definition of learning. And all of this just to say, these are all the things that are guiding, we call them guiding principles that have been developed, let's say, a new one every 5 years, but they were all connected. They were not changing direction. So our definition of learning, which has the component of agency in it and being a type of learning that we want to foster, it has to be challenging and joyful and serve an authentic purpose. That's another core element in flourishing. So I connect flourishing to the definition. Then a few years later, we revised our definition of global citizenship, where we actually put even higher focus on the planet and on being good ancestors. Again, kind of connections with flourishing are there. And then finally, in 2022, we developed together with the whole community our strategy. And the key focuses of the strategy is, we have a one-page visual of our strategy, and at the bottom is actually our mission and core values. So we are going back, and kind of grounding ourselves in our mission and core values. And then we are connecting it to the years of previous strategy, which was well-being and innovation, and continuing to build on that. And then two kind of new areas that we kind of identified as, really moving towards as much as possible is defining WAB alumni as agents of sustainable and ethical living, and also as champions of inclusion, diversity, equity, and justice. So in a way, I would say, there's this kind of red thread of flourishing from the first guiding principle till the last one, which is our current strategy. So I think that's why the word flourishing sits really well with the school. And just to mention this connection with AI, when we talk about AI, we just talk about it as a tool, and I think the flourishing has a special meaning, that word, when in the world of AI. You would never really say you kind of you flourish with AI, kind of because you are engaged with AI. AI supports to do certain things, but really flourishing, I feel it like that kind of as a force that kind of lifts that AI from doom's gloom scenario into something that can just support us in our human endeavors, and actually maybe will help us to focus even more on who we are as humans and what our responsibilities are.
And especially if it's used, like Fatma was saying, as an inquiry-based tool. I'm not saying everything, but how do you, as an exploration tool, how does it help?
Exactly.
One of the questions that comes from the crowd, and for those of you who are in the crowd, please keep giving questions. What is it different than all of the other words? Global. You mentioned a bunch of these words, Marta, like global citizenship, social emotional learning, all of these concepts that have been buzzwords in international education and education over the last couple years. And I think just as educational leaders, how do you take, I think, Marta, as you said, this big concept and not be another word? So like, what are some of the strategies that you're thinking about, or how are you using this larger framework to bring things together and not be another buzzword? So that's a question from the crowd. What's your advice, or how are you using this to not just be another buzzword? I'll just open it up. Anyone who has a thought to throw in.
Go ahead, Marta.
I would say actually what's important is actually to spell it out, just basically to say to people, it might look similar, and it's actually, it's not that different from everything we've been talking about so far. But it has that additional, I would say, human component in it. And we just with the word flourish, which comes from a flower, I think it connects it even more to kind of who we are as humans, what we as humans, as uniquely human, we should do, and how we should support our own flourishing and other people's flourishing. So I would say it just, everything we've been doing so far, that's how we are explaining it, and just having this additional human component. I would say that's kind of how we are describing it. To when someone asks me, and these questions do come, is it another just fad by the words, something that kind of will just disappear? It might disappear, but I think for a while it will create a lot of good in schools. And if it's part of the strategy of global organizations such as OECD, IB, and so on, I think it will have a lot of resonance and amplification.
Fatma, what would you add?
Yeah, in my experience, when it creates that confusion and that kind of, again, is because the school is not really grounded or is very clear about what it's trying to do with its students, its programs and initiatives, and everything is just an add-on. And that was my last message yesterday to the conference. They said, I said, please don't just add on, because one, your staff are going to say, we're not committed, completely disconnect. The students are going to call your BS, because they see that you're just doing these things, and there's no genuine, if it all boils down to your core and purpose. And we talked a lot about the purpose of education. What's the purpose of the education you're trying to do in your school? What are you trying to achieve? What is the profile of your graduate? What kind of, we at ARIS right now, we talk about the ARIS legacy, and our legacy are our graduates. And if in 3 years they come back to us, what stories do they share with us? What impact, what things did they say they remember about us, and how it has impacted them, where they are? I think it becomes so much easier dealing with all these kind of new words or new trends when, as a school, you're very much grounded in what you're trying to do. You have these important conversations and inquiries within. So we do a lot of retreats, we do a lot of sessions. Even when JUMP came to our school, we had sessions with our parents to talk about leadership. Last year with JUMP, we did a whole envisioning, taking data and surveys and focus group discussions with different groups in our communities about student leadership and what does it mean, and our conceptualization. So I guess it always boils down, whatever new thing, bring it to your community, let your community look at it, discuss it, turn it around, work it out, and make it their own within kind of their vision of what they're trying to do, or their mission and what the school is trying to do. And then it becomes ours, integrated, completely defined. It's not a foreign concept that we're just adding on like everything else. It needs to become whatever concept comes out. It has to become yours, integrated, internalized, defined, made sense of, and that's the only way it will transform your community. And I see that very clearly. I see that when it's just like, let's bring this new test, that's the new thing, versus let's make this at the core and let's define it, and let's be clear about how it's going to impact our community, and what sense do we give it, and what do we want to achieve by it.
Great. Angela, we're going to move on.
Keep going.
Sure.
Keep going, Justin.
The IB is the land of words. The IB is the land of words. So the second topic is around failure as a catalyst for human development. And so failure is actually a big part of flourishing, and how do you create opportunities for people to fail in a way that they then grow? Carol Dweck, who's obviously the growth mindset queen, I really like her quote in that, in a growth mindset, failure is not a permanent condition, but an opportunity to learn. Really anchors a lot of her thinking, is that the growth mindset creates this failure as an opportunity to step forward, to jump forward. And so I'll go back to you, Fatma. I know failure and creating opportunities for failure is a big passion of yours.
Yes.
So how can schools intentionally reposition failure as a necessary condition for growth, mastery, and problem solving, rather than something that parents are afraid of and kids are afraid of? So how do we restructure and think about failure not as a place of fear, but as a place of growth and excitement? And what have you kind of done in your community around recapturing failure?
a few years back, I presented on the power of failure, and I thought like I figured it out. And that my first orientation with my staff is always, my problem is not that you make mistakes. My problem is there's inaction, basically. And we thrive, we grow through our mistakes. And that's kind of, we thought we had that. We do free retakes, so the students, whatever with the IB, they get these. And I'm very happy. Last year, IB said, unlimited retakes for students doing their IB diploma. It's like, wow. So that kind of, we learn through our failure. And the worst thing I think is when we see that students like, this is the grade, this is what defines you, and there's no different options. So we've learned from the IB, we've included retakes, and there's a lot of portfolio process learning where students just get feedback, work on it, come back, update their work. They can improve their grades and all of that. I thought we've done a lot until we did the JUMP leadership training, and this opened up a whole new thing for me. Like the conversations I had with my students, the leadership facilitators that JUMP train, and after 4 days of spending with JUMP, my first question, I was like, kind of explain to me, reflect on your experience, and they could not stop talking about failure and the experience they had. I'm like, but you get that in IB. We give you, chance to. They said it's very different. It's very different. Learning, and they said something that was very powerful. They said the way JUMP organizes it is that they're expecting you to fail, and they want you to fail. And it's all the reflection from that failure that is important. Another thing they said, like, it was very clear the intentionality of it. They could kind of, underscore that the way JUMP designed these experiences with them is that they realize that they can only learn through their failure, through reflecting, through the conversations they have, through peer-to-peer, and they loved it. They said it was so empowering. It was so powerful. And it was a whole different experience than what they had in an IB classroom. And I'm like, here am I, like, okay, how do we integrate that kind of, life experience in a classroom that expects criterias, outcomes, things that are very, no matter what, IB is in itself advanced, but not to that level of experiential, of really life experiences. So we're here now trying to kind of think about that. I'm having these conversations with kids, definitely with teachers, on then how do we do that? Where do we put these experiences that are not graded, not things, but are very important life experiences and skills that they need to acquire? And how do we blend them and design around our school these kind of experiences? So for me, it was powerful. Even Justin, if you remember the session we did with parents, there was a group for failure, and all the parents went there. So the parents are having this huge conversation about, okay, how do we, we are expecting a lot from the school. We're expecting a lot from our students attending an IB, in the future and things like that. But how do we make failure integral and accepted and an empowering experience from all of that? So for me and for my team is now to figure out, how do we do this? The typical kind of IB experience and the next level life experience and learning from, deep failure.
And Marta, within the context of WAB, like where does authentic failure come into what you're trying to create for your students, and how does failure get talked about in that cultural context?
Actually, I don't think we talk a lot about the word failure itself. I think we just kind of give many opportunities to students to try the real life and fail. While Fatma was talking, I was thinking about what are these authentic experiences where our students can fail, and they do. Sometimes they fail, sometimes they don't. So, for example, when our students were leading our strategic work, kind of the strategy development, and they held numerous workshops with parents, with teachers. So they were leading the workshops, around 50 students, all together, and with elementary school students, high school students. And there were a lot of moments where these workshops really didn't go well, but there were many moments where they did, and the most beautiful thing is to see the growth of students, which means that they actually did grow over the years and months that they were leading those workshops. Our students engage in a lot of with a lot of projects, or they lead a lot of projects that are engaged with the community, and some go well and some don't. Some last for years, some don't. So these are kind of real, authentic experiences where we really try to be as much hands-off as adults, so that they can experience failure. One beautiful example was when we organized the global conference, Future of Education Now, last March. So basically, students had a huge role throughout the conference, from preparing for it to the kind of the final execution. So a group of and there were different groups of students for different things. Some were panel presenters, some were workshop leaders, some were just ambassadors behind the scenes, helping people, and part of it was a group of students was doing the whole, I would call it, kind of audio, visual, graphic setup, streaming of the conference. And the second day of the conference, and they were really proud in terms of they wanted to do it. They created videos, visuals, everything. And then our second day of the conference, we have the opening panel, and for that panel, we needed to kind of bring in one speaker online. Others were kind of on the stage already. So you have like 700 people coming into into the conference room and so on, and the streaming is not working. And it worked just kind of half an hour earlier. And now kind of looking, and I was next to the students, and I was thinking, okay, now we need to start the conference, and they are trying. They said, but it worked. We have to try, again, to bring the speaker in. And I told them, you have 5 minutes. If we cannot prolong kind of the start of the or delay further the start of the conference, you have 5 minutes. If you manage to bring the speaker in, you wonderful. If you don't, it doesn't matter. Learning experience we'll analyze later, and so on. They managed to bring the speaker in, but that could have been something that they would have experienced as a failure. It didn't happen, but it could have happened. So giving just students these opportunities where they really have to feel the authentic moment. I think us as educators, as schools, we sometimes just for two reasons. One, sometimes we want to shelter the students and don't want them to experience kind of real life failure, and sometimes we want to present ourselves in better light, such as, for example, in this global conference. So and I think we should put our pride and our wishes behind that kind of idea of, let's give them the opportunity to really either succeed and learn from the success also, or fail and learn from that. And so I would say, authentic experiences, non-filtered and non-sheltered, are the excellent opportunity for that real learning.
And from a perspective of the IB, which often people will see it as, I mean, the diploma, pursuing this top, success is that you get, X amount of points. Where do you feel, Angela, the IB is sitting with failure in this concept of flourishing and failure in flourishing, or flourishing and failure? What's the frame there for you guys?
Sure, thanks, Justin. And I had a big smile on my face because I was at that conference that Marta was describing, and I remember being on with the panel and how calm Marta stayed through all of that as the students were trying to connect and dial in someone from the East Coast to China for that panel. And they did such a brilliant job. And that was, I think, something that Marta people remembered from that conference was the involvement of students and their voice throughout the whole couple days. So Justin, from an IB perspective, I think you bring up a really good point, and Fatma, you sort of spoke to this. I think it's like, how do we navigate a polarity, which is we have our diploma program, which is high stakes, and we also want students to feel safe to have failure. So how do we thread that needle? I'm not going to give you the answer to that yet because I don't have it. I think together we can. But what I do want to speak to is sort of from a systems level, and that is how the IB redesigned the our evaluation process for schools, which again can feel every 5 years as a bit of a sort of high stakes experience because you have a team that comes to your campus. You've gone through a big process of self-study. And I think part of sort of your question about how do we create the conditions for growth to nurture that. So one of the very intentional changes that we made as an organization was with the new release of the standards and practices that came out in 2021, we took and we separated out the elements that were related to what I'm going to call compliance and what has to be in place, sort of foundational for you to be an IB school. And then we also took the component of really how do you grow and develop as a school? And I think that's where sort of the space to fail and be able to do that in a positively sort of generative way. And so we created what's called our program development planning cycle. And that really is an action research method for school communities. And what we encourage, or what our senior managers encourage schools to do, is take on a challenge that isn't easy. Take something on that, will stretch you as a learning community. And if it doesn't go as you planned, that's okay. That's what we ask our kids to do when they're in class with us and we design our units and we think through learning design, and that's what we want for you as school communities. So we're trying now also at the time of the visits to be very developmental in our focus, to look through an appreciative inquiry lens and really to think about how are you as a school community making it so in your context, you're stretching and sort of enabling those conditions for you to feel safe to grow and get feedback in a way that isn't about a pass or fail. It's about how are you in your journey of growth as a learning organization, we would say.
And part of that is that system has to change, and even the university system has to change before
Yeah.
high schools change, before middle school. So as we start to look at this evolution, I mean, it's okay for
Yeah.
us as individual schools. I think Marta, you kind of spoke to this. We're saying, oh yeah, we're going to change, but how are we being evaluated? And what our parents wanting us to do is get our kids into universities. And until there's a change there, or there's a systematic change, we can all say
Justin,
failure is great. Yep.
yeah. What's so interested is like Harvard. There's a team that studied deeper learning, and they've studied even IB schools and different kind of schools and innovative schools. And interestingly, from all the schools they've studied deeper learning, like really when kids develop their skills and they are engaged and are kind of happens only in after school activity or cross curricular activity. And I'm thinking, but we're in the business of learning, and how come our whole school experience is not about deeper learning and creating in the classroom these authentic experience of deep and deep learning only happens by trying things out and feeling that engagement, because and this is what I noticed in my school now. There's so much engagement in low, there's how would you call that it's not graded, it's not this, it's just they need to show up and do it and make it happen, and they're completely engaged and completely ready to learn. And they have so much to say out of it, but when it's got to happen in the classroom, they're so limited to the criteria, to the this, to the that, and they give you, because you need this, they will give it to you. They will give you what you need and not more than that.
Yeah, assessment for performance versus assessment for growth is an interesting.
And this was one student. He said it was clear to us that the work we did with JUMP, it was all about, we were reflecting for growth. I said, but as an IB, I said, you're talking about reflection, that you've done a lot of reflection with JUMP. And I said, but that's what you do in an IB classroom. All we do is ask you meta learning and metacognition and reflection. They said it's very different. And I'm like, how so? They're like, in the classroom, they're expecting us to reflect on these criteria, and we give them what they need. While with JUMP, it was the reflection for our own personal growth, our life, and the stuff we've learned and developed. And there's no right and wrong with that, you know? So I'm like, wow, and these are things I'm hearing from students themselves. And I guess this is what be my recommendation to everybody here. Have these honest conversations with students. They have so much to say, and you start really critically analyzing the work that you're doing and kind of what needs to change.
Thanks, Fatma. The next topic we're going to kind of spin into is on a similar frame, but in this concept of another big word that people talk about is resilience, and we're going to have Marta kind of start us off on it. But Kurt Hahn, one of the big minds behind Outward Bound and UWC and lots of other great things, the quote that I'll provide from him is, "There's more in us than we know. If we can be made to see it, perhaps for the rest of our lives we will be unwilling to settle for less." Sorry. If we're made to see it, perhaps for the rest of our lives we'll be unwilling to be less than what we see is truly powerful inside us. And as we get into this world of super complex environments and our ability to navigate complexity, humans actually have this unbelievable ability to navigate in complexity. And resilience is one of these concepts of how do we build resilience in young people so that they can navigate in the complex world. And so how are you doing that, Marta, in the concept of what's happening at WAB? And when you think about a parent saying, hey, I want my kid to be resilient, what are the experiences that they have that allow for them to have the resiliency to operate in complexity?
I think that actually, it goes really hand in hand with what I was talking about before, just giving students a lot of opportunities to experience real life in a way, not life just in the classroom and learning. I wouldn't discard that completely, because I think, teachers can create learning experiences where at least that kind of the challenge and the resilience of learning is developed. But kind of true resilience, I think, comes with real life. What you mentioned, what the quote mentioned is, that we have in ourselves more than we think we have, as humans we bounce back. I think for me, resilience is more than bouncing back. It's also kind of learning from that bouncing back. But if you look at what was happening during COVID time in China, 3 years of lockdowns, and the third year being the worst of all. And somehow, we were just going through that. We were trying to, kind of normalize our life and existence in that, really, not really, kind of almost abnormal times. And I would say we were all doing it in a different way. I would say that resilience is a very individualized and personalized concept. We all have it in ourselves. It just, to different, I would say, degrees, and different things can, kind of support us in that resilience. So what we are doing with students, I would say, and through that also teachers, I think really helping students learn from, or helping, actually, I would say through our social emotional learning program, helping them understand really who they are, as learners, as people, helping them interact with others, helping them, connecting them with the world outside of the classroom, so that they kind of, in still sheltered context of a school, have these glimpses into what's really happening in the world. So I think it's a really systematic process, and or that it's, I would say, I would connect it most to the like strategic social emotional learning process in terms of learning about themselves, and then kind of plus exposure to authentic situations where they can practice their resilience. So if I would say it just it takes time to develop it in some people, but in the end, when we talk to our alumni, for example, we did a a couple of years ago, we did a big survey with our WAB alumni, and some of them said, yes, maybe you protected us too much. Kind of we lived in that bubble and we were not really ready. But then they also said, but going back then, but we remember then the school mission about, connection and inspiring and challenge and so on. And kind of that helped us through. And from that kind of, I would say, from that moment where quite a number of them said, you protected us too much, I think we also kind of are trying now to protect our students less and less, really to expose them to some of the things that maybe previously we would have sheltered them from.
Great. Thanks, Marta. Over to you, Angela.
So I see a connection between resilience and then what we were just talking about, which is failure. And when I sort of think about, what in my life has helped to develop my own resilient capacity, it's like the challenges that I've had and also the mistakes that I've made. And then I think to Marta, to your point, it's like, how did I learn from those so that I can, navigate differently next time that I come upon these? So I think, within the school setting, it's like setting those appropriate challenges and also reflecting as educators, are we trying to sort of protect too much? And I think, both Fatma and Marta, you've sort of spoken to how we also, it's not just for the students to reflect, but also the educators about like the appropriate level of challenge and risk that we let our kids take part in. And then how do we provide the scaffolding so that we can learn and move forward? But it's definitely it's a capacity that grows over time, and it has to be in that sweet spot of, the zone of proximal development often to make sure that we land it. So
how do you mean zone of proximal development?
So I think if I were to think about something that was way beyond my capacity, and I was like sort of maybe pushed into an experience like that, do I think I would learn from it? Like, absolutely. Would it ultimately make me resilient? Like, probably. But if it was, a stretch that I think I had helped to think about or I was nudged towards. So I think it's within finding that zone that keeps learners, because I think it is quite personal.
I'll just jump in here. I know, Marta, you've done some work with Ellen from Sea Change Mentoring. Slight plug, amazing organization, amazing human being. One of the things agree, so fantastic. But one of the things around resilience, and it takes time, and it is nuanced. And sometimes, we want to build resilience. What experience can we create right now that the person, when they're done it, will be resilient? And it's, I think, as you hit the nail on the head there, Angela, it takes multiple different years, and it's an edge, like as you go through the process, as mentors, facilitators, educators, we support those individuals through it, but it's really a self-driven, and that taking ownership of how far I'm willing to step outside that proximal development space, I think is really important. Fatma, I'll give you a couple of minutes, but we're almost on the edge of time. So anything to add on resilience?
Yeah, I want to push back on the we protect our kids. Sometimes, and I've pushed back with the parents on that, and they're like, the environment that you have in that community, and that's not the world. And I'm like, why not that the kids understand that this is how the world can be, and go out and make it happen? Like that kind of community care, trust, focus on what is important, and impact and heart and soul. I said it's not taking, bubbling them or this. It's actually showing them what the world can be, and them going out. And for me, resilience is, as you said, it's not something we develop in a few activities. It's a lifelong process. At 40, 50, we're still trying to figure it out. But I think what is very important for the students, and I've seen it with ours, because we started our well-being program in 2012, 2013. We had our well-being curriculum already in 2017. We had developed it. We had well-being agents and well-being teachers. We had a well-being department even before COVID hit, by the way. So maybe it has to do with my background in medicine. I always feel that And that's my life trajectory. At many moments, I've had to go through counseling to figure out where to go and how to seek help. So for me, it was very important that from primary, our students understand that sometimes you'll face challenges, but the key thing is to seek the help you need to get through that. And the help could be through people around you, could be through your friend, through self-reflection and all of that. So I guess for me, resilience is, it's not kind of only the experiences, but it's the tool and the people and the environment and the network you create. For example, for my own daughter, like as a parent, she was in grade 5, and one night she says, today I had to go 5 times to Madame Genet, who's her counselor, and I'm like, my God, why would my daughter 9 years old go 5 times to counselor? She was going through a lot of emotion, like overwhelmed, all of that. But for me, what gave me so much joy is that early on, my daughter figured out that, when I'm facing so much and a lot of things are overwhelming, I could go to people, I could seek help, So I guess for me is very much is put in place the resources, and that you make students realize that, hey, life is about figuring it out by yourself. It's about connecting, reaching out, seeking the help that you need, and making the best of it, basically. So it's more like I would say it's more of a holistic and understanding that we cannot do this by ourselves. We need help many times.
And that's an interesting frame, right? As we often think about resilience as an individual, but not resilience as the system around the individual. So thanks for reframing it on that, Fatma.
Mm-hmm.
So final question, we're going to take a couple minutes and then we'll close, is in terms of when you look at this OECD framework of human flourishing and everything that's saying, what's the thing that needs to change in education from your perspective? Like, what would you redesign? And we only have like 1 minute per person, but think about like, what is the main thing that you would change in the current system, not throw it out, but adapt it or evolve it in the current education system to ensure that we're building people that are flourishing. And Marta, we'll start with you and then go to Angela and then Fatma. Go ahead, Marta.
I don't need 1 minute. I can just say one word: assessment. And assessment, not within the school that we create, but what we are forced to create externally in a way, if we want our students to achieve and succeed in the world that is still based on grade levels or on number type of assessment. I think assessment evaluation, when it's important, especially formative, but we should move towards assessing students through competencies development and not letters or grades.
Great. Over to you, Angela.
Oh, I can give you a minute back because Marta, you nailed it. I think that assessment is the tail that wags the dog. And if we really want to measure what matters and what's important, we have to rebalance to think about a focus on competencies. And really, I think that's part of some projects that we're involved in and really excited about, and really delving into how do you measure ethical thinking, how do you find out about a student's level of agency, and sort of make sure that that's equally weighted to the content that is there. So I would have to agree with Marta on that. Absolutely.
And Fatma, 1 minute, go for it.
Personalized pathways. Even if the IB doesn't have this pathway, that's what your student need, go after it. I have students are on non-IB pathways because that's what they need. So kind of focus on what your students need. I have a 5 students to 1 teacher ratio because we're so much kind of addicted to the concept that we need to ensure that every child achieve their best potential in who they are and what they want and what they love. So we might have 2 students doing, and I guess what we learned is from the CP, the career program from IB, like blew my mind. And that much of individualization and personalization is so powerful when you have students really choosing the courses that they are really passionate about and things that they are very practical and career related versus pure academic writing and content. So kind of just focus on your student, and every student is very different. Get to know them, get to experience, and show them that you really care, and build with them what they need to be successful and actually very passionate about learning and being in your school.
So a big thank you to both Marta, Angela, and Fatma, to all of you for taking time this evening to share your thoughts and ideas. For those of you who joined and added questions to the conversation, big thank you to all of you who threw in questions. We'll send a recording around. Please share it to folks that you think would be interested. And we'll also have another virtual roundtable in January. So keep an eye out for that. Continuing different conversations and having in-depth explorations with smart minds is kind of the goal of these virtual roundtables. So if you are a speaker, if I can ask you to stay on for a second, and for the participants, thank you very much, and we'll get you guys to sign out of Zoom. Thank you very much. Bye, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.